Yeah, morning, Ian. This confirmation that a plant here in Sunderland that's been making cars for 40 years is going to be making them for at least another 10. An attempt to future-proof the petrol and diesel cars and the production here, that transition to electric vehicles, with the announcement that those electric vehicles, those models you mentioned, they will be powered by batteries made here in the northeast. A second gigafactory the company is committed to today. It's 18 months ago I was here when Boris Johnson was here to herald the first of those factories, £1 billion investment. Well, at least £1 billion more kicked in by Nissan. We can expect around about 10% to be matched by the government to ensure that the batteries are built here. That doesn't just ensure the next model, the next phase of electric vehicles, it also future-proofs against the EU rules on rules of origin, the technical rules that make it difficult to export cars without facing tariffs if you aren't making your own batteries. So good news for Sunderland. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor were here helping out on the production line. That's what a massive investment in British industry gets you in terms of ministerial presence. But it is striking. This just comes a couple of months after Rishi Sunak delayed the ban on petrol and diesel cars. You'll recall that seemed to question his commitment to net zero, and it did get the wider British business and industrial community thinking, where is this government coming from? Well, I spoke to Nissan's president and chief executive, who was in from Japan today, about whether that change in tone from the Prime Minister affected Nissan, which has stuck to 2030 as its goal. This is what he told me.
The market is evolving at many speeds, so I think it's not a matter of the timing, rather how we are going to anticipate the future and to do what we have to do. So for me, as far as our strategy is concerned, we are keeping the way we are, and we want to deliver as much as possible something to safer, cleaner, and inclusive world to the customer.
So this is an early return on some of the measures that we heard the Chancellor announce on Wednesday in the autumn statement too. He announced £2 billion was going into a pot of money to help the automotive industry move towards green technologies. The old money had run out, and clearly some of that money will be heading here to the northeast. And full expensing, the ability to write off investment in plant and machinery. Well, if Nissan get a move on and start investing in some of this new kit now, they'll be able to claim back on that too. So I think we've had both the Chancellor and the Prime Minister here this morning. Says they are unequivocal, this is good news. Talking to the staff here this morning, they're very proud of what they do here in Sunderland. They now know they can look to the future with some confidence. They'll continue doing it for some years to come.
OK, thanks, Paul. Now, Legal & General assumes some of the risk of paying the pensions of some 53,000 former employees of Boots in a £4.8 billion deal, which is the biggest of its kind in the UK. It means the scheme will no longer be reliant on Boots to pay benefits to its members. The chair of the scheme's trustees said the agreement would ensure that the pensions of former Boots employees would be protected for decades to come. The deal also removes an obstacle to a potential sale of Boots by its US parent, Walgreens Boots Alliance. Well, joining me now is Andrew Cale. He's Chief Executive of Institutional Retirement at Legal & General. Andrew, welcome to you. This is a buy-in as opposed to a buy-out. What's the difference?
So, yes, a buy-in is generally the first stage of a transaction. It's where a trustee will look to purchase effectively an insurance contract, which, as you said, protects the members and provides the trustee with an insurance contract, but the pensioners remain the pensioners of the scheme. A buyout is when the scheme effectively winds itself down and the pensioners become, on the same terms of benefits, become pensioners of the insurance company and the pension scheme cease to exist. So it tends to be a transitional phase that can happen quickly, but often can take a number of years depending on the specifics of the scheme.
And so how long will this transition be in this instance, do you think?
I mean, to be agreed, it's very early stages. We only signed the transaction last night, but I would expect within the next year or so that we'll move through from a buy-in position to a buyout position. But that's to be discussed with the trustees and making sure that those arrangements are smooth. What's critical here is making sure that we provide excellent service to the pensioners in payment and the deferred members. So this is all done at a pace which makes sure that we are protecting the position of the pensioners and working smoothly with the trustees and the company.
And how much money changes hands in the first instance?
It depends on the asset flows. So these transactions, particular ones at scale, the asset base will typically be made up of what we would characterize as liquid assets. We could call that cash and liquid gilts, cash and gilts. And then some of the assets of pension schemes are less liquid, and therefore they take time to sell in the open market, and that liquid funds moves more slowly. All of that forms part of that move from a buy-in to a buyout and takes time. So this particular scheme, given its large and complexity, has a range of liquid and non-liquid assets that we'll be working with the trustees over the next few months to create sort of that effective transfer.
That's interesting. You say non-liquid assets. What sort of, we're talking about properties and buildings here, presumably, are we?
It depends. It varies scheme by scheme. Oftentimes it's investment grade properties, property leases, investment funds of funds holdings. So different schemes have different investment criteria. When they move on to an insurance company, there tends to be a much stricter, more regimented way of dealing with assets that we're allowed to use for pension solvency purposes. So each scheme is different in the way that they've invested, but then under the rules that we operate under, particularly as a UK insurer regulated by the PRA, we transition those assets onto something that provides absolutely an underpinning to make sure we can create the liquidity and the duration for the pensioners, but also as an asset base that works for our regulatory and economic position as opposed to a single pension scheme.
Now, there's a good deal of interest in doing deals like this at the moment from companies with big defined benefit or final salary pension schemes. Why is that? Why are they so hot right now?
I think they've been hot for some time. We've been writing these types of contracts for 35 years. It's often seen from a trustee's perspective as the gold standard to move from a single corporate covenant to an insurance covenant, which is often much more secure given the regulatory nature of our balance sheet. So they've always been popular, and we've been writing multiple billions of pension risk transfers for years. There's two factors, I think, that have influenced why there's such high levels of demand now. One is, frankly, just time, and pension schemes have built up their funding levels and their asset base over time with investment performance and sponsor contributions so they can afford a buyout position. And then we've seen the market displacement in the last 12 months actually created an acceleration of that process where schemes, over a matter of a few weeks, became much better funded. With the asset falls they saw were actually more than compensated by the liability falls, and therefore the schemes and their trustees saw an opportunity to accelerate that buyout position. So companies like Legal & General have seen much higher levels of demand from trustees to want to affect that buy-in, buyout process that we spoke about.
Now, you mentioned the PRA just now, the Bank of England's Prudential Regulatory Authority. They've recently made some comments about insurers like yourself selling on some of the liabilities to reinsurers. Have Boots pensioners got anything to worry about on that front here?
Absolutely not. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. The PRA, we're in very active conversations with the PRA, as you would imagine, about across the entirety of our business. We have a very close working relationship. But we use reinsurance if we feel it's appropriate on a particular transaction, but only in a way that is putting the pensioner security right at the heart of that. So we would spend a lot of time thinking about any form of credit risk right across our portfolio. And so absolutely in any of the contracts we take on, the financial security of Legal & General in a way that it can protect the pensioners and our ability to pay their pensions over what will be, frankly, decades is absolutely paramount to how we operate.
OK, Andrew, it's a complex topic. Thanks for jogging us through it today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Some other stories for you now. And Barclays is reportedly working on a cost-saving plan that could put as many as 2,000 jobs at risk. Reuters is reporting that the lender is working on plans to save as much as $1.25 billion. It says most of the jobs at risk are at Barclays Execution Services. That's the part of the bank which provides technology, operations and other services across the group. As at the end of last year, Barclays Execution Services employed some 22,300 people, making up a quarter of all Barclays staff. UK's competition watchdog said this morning it had concerns over the building materials supplier Mick George's sale. The company, which is one of the leading suppliers to the construction industry in East Anglia and the East Midlands, agreed in December last year to a takeover by the building materials group Hanson, which is owned by the German multinational Heidelberg Materials. But the Competition and Markets Authority said today the deal raises competition concerns over the supply of non-specialist aggregates or ready-mix concrete in 18 local markets. And the shipbuilding and maritime engineering group Harland & Wolff confirmed this morning it has had a takeover approach rejected by the Isles of Scilly Steamship Company, operator of the Silonian ferry service between Penzance and the Scilly Isles. Harland & Wolff, which owns facilities at Belfast, Methil and Arnish in Scotland and at Appledore in North Devon, said it was disappointed at the rejection. It said the Isles of Scilly to Penzance route was significantly underserved by the current operation and that there was an opportunity to build and operate ferries to service it. Now, the Swedish commercial vehicles giant Scania has today announced plans to decarbonise its supply chain. The bus and truck manufacturer has already struck a deal to ensure that all of the steel it buys will be produced on a fossil-free basis from 2026. But now the company, which is owned by Volkswagen, wants to go further and plans to implement mandatory green purchasing requirements for all future contracts with its suppliers and its partners. Well, joining me from Stockholm is Christian Levin. He's Scania's chief executive. Christian, welcome to you this morning. This covers 4 categories: steel, batteries, aluminium and cast iron, as I understand it.
Yeah, you're perfectly right, Diane. And this is, of course, a continuation of a longer journey where we started already back in 2016, redefining the purpose of our company, saying we need to be the one in heavy commercial vehicles, we as Scania, to drive the shift towards sustainable transport systems. Then that was followed by science-based targets 2019, and then we have worked relentlessly on the vehicle as such, because taking out carbon emissions in our industry, that is very much about decarbonizing the use phase, hence getting rid of the combustion engine, really. And as we this year inaugurate our battery factory here in Södertälje outside Stockholm, we start to deliver all sorts of vehicles as battery electric. We realize then that there's a next step to take. And that next step is to then approach the supply chain. Because, of course, a battery electric vehicle doesn't emit any CO2 emissions. It's absolutely clean in its use phase. But to build one of these vehicles, you consume an awful amount of steel, an awful amount of batteries, and the production of these materials, that is consuming or producing CO2, and that we need to address. So that's the announcement today, that we really go from talking about this to actually starting to sign contracts and use our purchasing power to also influence these industries.
Obviously, not all the suppliers that you currently use are potentially going to be able to meet your requirements. Does this mean that you're going to have to pay more in some cases for some of these materials?
We count on that in the beginning, and I think that is reasonable. I mean, they are, just as ourselves, taking on investments. And of course, that translates into a higher cost of the vehicle, and in the end, a minor but higher cost of the goods transported. So that is inevitable. But I think if you look a little bit more long-term, and here we talk up until 2030, we think it's actually going to be rather elimination of risk and avoidance of cost. Because there are regulatory measures coming into our markets. There is a very strong push from transport buyers to decarbonize. So I don't want to sit with a supply chain that will hinder me from doing good business or actually being able to do business at all. So yes, in the beginning, this is going to carry some cost, but long term, it's absolutely the opposite.
Does this mean that you're going to have to part company with some of your suppliers?
Yes, for sure. And we did not announce this without having a deep discussion with our suppliers. So the announcement from the last weeks with SSAB and H2 Green Steel on steel supply, of course, is in parallel and will be followed by similar plans together with aluminum suppliers, with our battery partner, but also with the iron supplier. And then further down the line, we of course need to approach all other materials and components we have on the vehicle. But these 4 categories, they actually cover 80% of the CO2 emissions from our supply chain.
And you mentioned just now the fact that you have just opened your own battery assembly plant just outside Stockholm. I gather you've had some problems, though, with obtaining battery cells from Northvolt. Are those issues cleared up now?
We're working very, very hard together to make sure that we can ramp up production according to demand. And the good thing is, of course, demand on battery electric vehicles is strong, and it is getting stronger. And at the same time, both for us and for suppliers such as Northvolt, it is a big exercise to rebuild an industrial production system away from combustion engines and into electric. So I think ourselves and all of our partners, we've had our fair share of troubles getting ramped up. And the start should have happened here in 1st of November. So we are a little bit late, but I see very good progress also with Northvolt that you mentioned in getting to terms with these problems. And then one cannot imagine to go from 0 to 100 over just a couple of weeks, but this will have to take a bit of time. And I count on our fantastic customers out there who have opted for these electric trucks to be a little bit patient. They will arrive and they will be great.
More broadly, it looks as though from your latest trading statement, things are going pretty well for you just now. Sales have remained reasonably robust.
Yeah, it's somewhat of a paradox, but on one hand, we see a geographical development where Europe is kind of normalizing from extremely high levels. So we rather see, a typically 2018, 2019 type of market in Europe. And it might continue to soften. Let's see now with the pause in interest rate hikes. But we see very strong market in Brazil, which for us is very important. Mexico is growing very fast. And then there's a mixed development in Asia. But putting all of that together, you're right. I'm actually a little bit surprised that we have such strong order intake and can continue to run our production system on basically full capacity.
Well, that's good news. Christian, I gather this is the first English language broadcast interview by the company for many, many years. So we do appreciate you talking to us today. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ian.
Still to come here on Business Live. We'll have a look at how the markets are doing this Friday morning. Stay with us.
And now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. That's it. It got us then.
There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still.
We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with her, aren't they?
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Well, equity markets in the Asia-Pacific region had a mixed session overnight. The highlight was the Nikkei in Tokyo, which notched up a fourth consecutive weekly gain to finish close to a 30-year high. Well, in Europe, stocks are also trading close to a two-month high right now. That's a picture right now. All the main continental European indices in positive territory. Talking points today include BASF, the German chemicals giant, up nearly 2% on a report that its energy business is a possible target for Abu Dhabi National Oil. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is currently trading 0.25% lower, heading for its a weekly loss right now. Sage, whose chief executive we had on the programme on Wednesday, looks to have run into a bit of profit-taking. The shares were up by 15% so far this week. Conversely, Vodafone, which yesterday hit its lowest level for a year, appears to have attracted a few bargain hunters this morning, currently 1.5% ahead. Other blue-chip gainers today include B&M European Value, which is up nearly 1% on the back of broker comment. Outside the FTSE 100, the ready meal maker Bakkavor is up another 1.5% after director buying earlier this week, but the games developer Team 17 is down by some 41% following a profits warning. Over on the foreign exchange markets, pound 0.25% to the good against the dollar, up 1/5% against the euro. The single currency, meanwhile, very slightly ahead against the greenback. The tenge in Kazakhstan is up 1% today. That's after the central bank raised interest rates, cut them actually from 16% to 15.75%. After falling for 4 consecutive weeks, the oil price is poised to finish the week higher. Currently, a barrel of Brent crude will cost you 81%, 78 cents a barrel. That's up just under 0.5% on the session. Joining me now is Sophie Lund-Yates, Chief Equities Analyst, of course, at Hargreaves Lansdown. Sophie, welcome to you. Let's start with this story out of Barclays. Looks like some big cost cuts on the way.
Hi, good morning. Yes, so there's rumours swirling that Barclays is going to be looking to trim costs in quite a big way. And the number that's really grabbing the headlines is that this could mean up to 2,000 job cuts. Now, they've been incredibly keen to point out that this is very unlikely to come from kind of customer-facing roles. It's more kind of your head office type functions. And really what we're seeing, and the reason for this, should it come to fruition, is all about the group trying to trim as much fat as it can as it prepares for a less lucrative interest rate environment. And then also the fact that, it can't be forgotten that Barclays has a huge investment bank business, unlike names like Lloyds. And that area is seeing quite difficult behaviours just because of the way that markets are at the moment. So it's essentially trying to trim some fat, become a bit nimbler as we head into the new year.
Yeah, interesting story, that. Now, yesterday, of course, we got some quite good PMI survey data out for the UK. Today, we've had some consumer confidence figures, which have surprised to the upside too.
Yes, we have indeed. So a consumer confidence index by GfK has shown that consumer confidence is risen. It's still negative, but it's risen to -24 from -30. Now, the reason this is important at this time of year, of course, is it's Black Friday time, it's festive trading. So this could spell good news for the retailers. The UK market, the FTSE in particular, is very much geared towards consumer discretionary spending. So understanding that people are feeling a bit better about the outlook for their finances could translate into better performance for retailers. But as I say, things are still negative overall, so we're certainly not out of the woods, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, but it will be monitored very closely by investors and markets alike.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned retail there, Sophie. We've heard from Mothercare this morning.
Yes, so Mothercare, the share price has been all over the place this morning. It opened down about 4%. It's now up about 9%. And that's really a lack of terrible news rather than it being a celebration of anything good. The company is really continuing to struggle, particularly with trading in the Middle East, where conditions are quite difficult. Mothercare, of course, transitioned into a more capital light business model following it falling into administration in recent memory, which is more based on franchises. But those franchisees are struggling, and the shares are still down about 35% overall this year. And really, for me, the figure that I'm kind of needs a laser-like focus on it is their net debt levels. Net debt compared to the company's cash profits or EBITDA is very problematic.
OK, Sophie, got to leave it there. Good to see you today. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's it from me for today and the week. There's no show this afternoon because of the hostage coverage. See you on Monday. Have a good weekend. Cheerio.